up? I'm Rick, the Fat Man GM. You may or may have not have heard of me mabbling and rambling on a few of the YouTube channels and Facebook channels regarding to our hobby, role-playing games in general, tabletop games, wargaming, so on, etc. I have started back when I was in my early teens. I have well over 40 years worth of experience in this hobby that we love and share, and a big part of what I like to do is go back and revisit a lot of the stuff that I have and have accumulated in my gaming career, if you will. And everything from MERP, Starfleet, from FASA, a slew of Dungeons and Dragons and Shadowrun, Star Wars, etc., etc., etc. And I revisit these items individually, and hopefully to give some nostalgia for myself, to give you a little bit of a insight into some game system that you may or may not have heard of or may have not had the opportunity to play, and to remind those of us out there that do have them that these are quite viable and still entertaining today. So here we go. Right, just realizing while I was watching the Montauk lead up, or whatever you want to call it, that I'm wearing the same shirt that I did that Montauk a month and a half ago. But it's a comfortable shirt. I got a number of them, but usually I'm usually wearing work shirts because my job is in and out all day long. So here's another talking head coming at you, because it is what it is. I had some this is where my brain starts to get fuzzy on me, because I know what I want to say, and it's just kind of bouncing around a little bit in there where it's hiding in the closet. And this last week I had a couple of videos I posted up on a few Facebook channels, and about what I term the Konnichiwa Maru scenario in gaming. If any of you are familiar with Star Trek, passingly familiar with Star Trek, it's called the Kobayashi Maru. This is a no-win situation. It is a kind of like a part of the final exam for Starfleet officers. They're put into a situation that they can't win. If they do not act, people die, ships are destroyed. They fail to follow the general orders of Starfleet, which I did a series of them, so they're on my website somewhere, where you're supposed to, several general orders say you're supposed to go to the aid of Federation citizens, protect property, Federation property, citizens, etc., etc., and pretty much drop everything else for the most part to go do this. But to do so, you have to cross the Klingon neutral zone, and where you're find out that it is a trap, and you're set upon by an indeterminate number of Klingons. It's a running gag in Star Trek that the only senior officer, only officer to ever have won against the Kobayashi Maru was Captain Kirk, and that's because he cheated. He altered the parameters, and so he could rescue the crews and passengers of the ships. Meanwhile, the argument, of course, is that, well, that's cheating. Yes, but sometimes you have to think outside the box, right? So in this wonderful hobby of ours, and this holds true to just about every game, role-playing game system I've had the privilege of playing, they don't all have their own, and it's ECL or ECU or ESG 4712, whichever you want to look at. If you look in the back of the Dungeon Master guide, or the monster manuals for most Dungeon Master or D&D, and in the Dungeon Master's guide, there's references to something like estimated character level, or there's estimated challenge level, a number of different acronyms for this purpose. The idea being is that your character or characters are capable, it's estimated they're capable of handling this level of challenge, and should do so successfully. They should roughly get beat up in the process, maybe use up some stuff, but it's a fair chance for them to succeed. A lot of times the characters fail to understand that or especially novice players, fail to understand that your challenge rating actually goes up the more equipment you get. You get better weapons and armor, magical items, magical armor and weapons, and etc., etc. This raises your defense capability and your offense capability. A lot of other things that enhance your ability to avoid taking damage or to overcome a situation. This, in my opinion, now this is just my opinion, and I've had many heated debates over this over the years with both players and other GMs who don't subscribe to this philosophy, that your characters should be able to handle within reason anything you toss at them. But there's always a time and a place, and I'm not advocating doing this thing every time you sit down at the table with your group, because then it gets to be old and it's no longer kind of a surprise. But like in the real world and situations, you can't always guarantee that you're equal to or better than what you're putting yourself into. And so having put up big bosses, if you will, from the video game vernacular, taking encounters that are way above the player's capabilities of handling and throwing them at them with the understanding that they're always option number two. Option number one always seems to be go on the offensive. Attack, 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 right? And that gets into a mindset. But a wise warrior, a wise general, a savvy rogue, should know their limitations. As John Wayne's, John Wayne? I don't know if it's, maybe she knows limitations. Maybe it's not John Wayne. Anyway, sometimes the better part of valor is to retreat and regroup and rethink and decide how can we come across. We all know there's a thing here, or a creature, or a beast, or a somebody that's out to get us, and they are way above our ability. There may be, in OCC terms, they may be twice as powerful as the entire group combined. And at that point, do they have a chance of success? And my argument is, well, of course they have a chance of success. You just have to plan, strategize, maybe make a couple errands to get some extra firepower, maybe recruit another couple NPC players to temporarily boost the group's capability, scout the terrain, catch it somehow or another, fight it on your terms and on your grounds, not on whatever it is on their terms and on their grounds. If you look at some of the smaller humanoids in the monster manuals, for example, they term the goblins cowardly, and usually in a derogatory way, and I say that's kind of unfair to the goblins. I think it's they're everything else around them is bigger, meaner, stronger, more powerful, even outnumbering them on many occasions. Let's look at orcs versus goblins. The goblins are always going to be at a disadvantage. So a goblin's first piece of self-worth is to bug out, is to retreat, is to get away. And if whenever opportunity presents it, they've got the numbers, they've got the advantage, they attack. And they try it really, really hard to put down their opponent, because they're going to take advantage of that. And as soon as things go south, they run away again, because that's their nature. Kobolds are even smaller, they're even more primitive. And if you look at I like kobolds for a number of reasons, but if you really, really read the intro material on how you should operate and what they do, kobolds are ambush specialists. They're not frontline fodder. Only time you ever see kobolds acting in concert as part of an army is usually because they're being driven forward by the whips and weapons of bigger, meaner things behind them, and using them as to burn up traps and set off ambushes, and to more or less as cannon fodder. When they operate on their own, if you play them right, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, always my opinion, if you play them right, then kobolds are going to utilize their traps a lot. They're going to use their terrain a lot. They know their home territory, and they're going to harass your characters from a distance. They're going to try to trap them so they can then harass them from a closer distance, and they're going to try to divert them, possibly lead them away from the lair. if it becomes quite apparent to the kobolds that they are totally outclassed and that the whatever's harassing them is not going to go away, they leave, they retreat. Often they have little hidey holes or escape routes planned, and their whole tribe ups and bugs out, and then comes back later after your group of adventurers have gone on their way, or whatever's moved on and left their territory altogether. And if whatever's moved into their territory didn't leave, they find someplace else, because that's how they should operate, in my opinion, of course. So when I look at let's look at another aspect of this. The Konnichiwa Maru is to challenge your players, sometimes in ways that are creative and outside the box, so it's a bit of a surprise to them. I try to let my players know my mindset and my style of play in session 0 as best I can. I can't always remember every detail. I mean, I used to have a little notebook with a list of things, the do's and don'ts that I tried to adhere to for my version of a home rules or homebrew, or however you want to look at it. But I also look at the players. When I have a group of experienced players, veteran players who have been playing for years and are well familiar with the game systems that we're playing, or at least similar game systems, I equate that as having a bit more skill and knowledge for your player, or for your character. This adage, well, we keep eating, in character and out of character, IC versus OCC. Sure. No, you can play that. I said, well, I know all this stuff, but my character doesn't, so I try not to give that advantage to my character. But that's very, very hard to divorce what you know from what your character should know. If you're operating a first-level farm kid that just came in from just left the Thorpe to chase down those pesky goblins that keep raiding the pigs, they're not going to have all that information you, the player, have accumulated from many campaigns, through many worlds, through different systems, through different GMs, right? But it's still up here. Even when you don't think so and you're trying not to add that element to it, it's still there. And so from that perspective, I try hard to challenge my players. So I equate them, whether they realize it or not, whether they listen to me or not, when I tell them I'm doing it, that you are wise and smart enough as a player to see a situation. You even have the unique advantage of actually being slightly removed, because your character's sitting in front of you, in front of that situation, or in that situation, while you, the player, are sitting behind them, pulling the strings. So you can at that point go, I think we need to back up, or go this way, or hide until that thing goes away, and then figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to approach it. So that's my thought on the technique for challenging the players using the existing sets of material and rules. Is it wrong? Is it right? There's nowhere in the rule books that say you cannot. There's a lot of places where they suggest you don't, but there's no place that doesn't say you can't challenge them with something above their grade. From that perspective, I would not do this to novice players, to new players. I would never do this to new players, because new players don't have all that back knowledge and experience. They're not veterans. They're not aware that there are options, or they may not be aware that there are options. Even though I find that sometimes the newer players are extremely creative because they don't know all the limitations. They're free to act and do things in a fresh perspective that veteran players have a tendency to be kind of weighing the scale of success and failure. To that note, and I've heard beautiful stories, great stories of people in their campaigns, and how everything was wonderful and fun and everybody was excited. Great. But then I hear this story when half our party was wiped out and the rest of us were beat up pretty bad, or the entire party was wiped out. I think it was a failure. That was not a successful encounter. That was not a successful conclusion to your campaign. It was a failed end to your campaign. You know, and there's an exception. There's always exceptions. The one exception will be the you're our only hope, right? They're doing and acting as heroes would, or reluctant heroes would. Adventurers are put forward in a position where they are sometimes confronted with a moral dilemma and a prerogative to act regardless of the odds. And if they manage to pull a rabbit out of their hat and they succeed even at the destruction of their group, then it's a worthy thing, because that's part of that mindset and that campaign style. But if you just bumble your way into a situation and you're totally outclassed, outmaneuvered, outgunned, and you pursue it, you know, in certain situations, surrender is also not a fail. You know, surrender can offer, first off, it allows you to live for another day, and it gives you options and opportunities from gameplay to explore other methods of dealing with something in game. So, you know, you could find yourself as in a captive state and get yourself free and rally and go forward. I mean, or you might be, your failure might be the genesis of the next campaign, where the relatives or other members of their family or community hear the terrible loss of the adventurers and put together another group and pursue the same problem. The difference is you don't necessarily cover the same ground. You're going after the problem that caused the first group to fail. It's just an option, right? Just an option. On one final note, and I might end up doing a video. You know, I think I'm not. I think I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to do a different video on that one. So, what do you think? Is it a bad thing to put out too much on occasion to really challenge the players to use their heads and their wits and their OCC knowledge, as opposed to just hacking their way into a situation and hoping for the best? As always, I'm interested in your comments and thoughts on it. Put them below. Tell me I'm wrong.